Hello everyone. Today I'd like to present a mesoscale numerical model for polycrystalline rock salt, including crystal plasticity creep, solution-precipitation creep, crack propagation, and crack heating. Underground rock salt is widely used as the repository for solid waste disposal due to its low permeability and self-healing mechanism. These properties can help to protect the solid waste from polluting the underground water. However, the long-term creep deformation of underground rock salt may influence its permeability, which is influenced by thermal, hydromechanical, and chemical loading and could last for thousands of years. The goal of this study is to build a material model to predict the long-term creep behavior of underground polycrystalline rock salt. The total deformation of polycrystalline rock salt includes three parts. The dislocation creep occurs in form of dislocation slide and dislocation climb along the slip systems of rock salt. The green boundary sliding and solution precipitation creep is crucial for the long-term creep, where the creep rate is below 10 to the minus 7 per second. Under stress gradient, the salt crystalline within the high-pressure region will dissolve into the green boundary brine and diffuse along the green boundary and precipitate at the low-pressure region. Also, the micro-cracking and diffusion-induced crack heating is important as they influence the permeability evolution. Before we introduce the material model, we introduce a unified interface indicator for the green boundary and the crack. The actual green boundary has zero thickness, while the actual crack involves displacement discontinuity. In order to introduce a unified interface indicator to describe the interfacial diffusion, a Heaviside function is used for green boundary with finite thickness. The green boundary indicator is combined with the crack phase field order parameter to get the interface indicator. This is the governing equations of the multiphysics problem, including the balance of linear momentum, the balance of macro force, the balance of energy, and the balance of mass. Here we want to emphasize the two special treatments in our governing equations. In the balance of macro force equation, the zeta field is power conjugate to the second order gradient of the phase field. In this way, we introduce the fracture anisotropy into the model. In the balance of mass equation, the total mass of salt is conserved during the solution diffusion precipitation process. This is the free energy we used in our model. The thermal elastic stored energy considers the thermal expansion and the tension compression split. The plastic stored energy for the crystal plasticity model represents the hardening evolution in each slip system. In the high-order crack surface energy, we introduce the fracture anisotropy term to describe the preferential fracture directions of rock salt with cubic crystal structure. Finally, the chemical free energy and the thermal energy takes the Euro form. The interface diffusion equation comes from the dissipation inequality. The solution precipitation rate is derived based on the experimental observation, where the solution precipitation rate is influenced by the local pressure and the interfacial radius. Since it's impossible to obtain the crack tip radius in the phase field method or any other numerical method, we used a crack tip indicator to find the crack tip and assign the experimentally measured crack tip radius to this region. The crystal plasticity model is calibrated against the unaxial compression experiment of single crystal rock salt. The other material parameters related to thermal expansion, fracture, and interfacial diffusion are obtained from the literature. We first designed a single crystal tension test to observe the sawtooth crack pattern, which is a direct result of the fracture anisotropy of single crystal rock salt. Then we performed a polycrystal compression test under isochoric compression boundary condition. Ductile fracture is observed in the stress strain curve, which is mainly caused by the heterogeneity of the polycrystalline sample. This is the phase field distribution and the von Mises stress distribution within the domain. The material heterogeneity and the fracture anisotropy has a strong influence on the crack pattern within the domain. We further designed a numerical experiment to observe the solution-precipitation creep. A polycrystalline RVE with 4 grains is constructed manually. The external pressure is first increased from 0 to a desired value, and then maintained at a constant value. The solution precipitation creep is observed in the creep rate curve, and the strain rate coefficient is close to 1, which is consistent with the experimental observation. Here is the concentration evolution and the strain evolution within the 4-grain polycrystalline RVE under constant pressure. As time increases, the brine concentration and its gradient almost remain constant over time, but as the salt diffuses from the high pressure region to the low pressure region, the constant grain boundary diffusion will introduce compressive creep strain on the compressed grain boundary and tensile creep strain on the free grain boundary, which is typically called the solution precipitation creep. In the last numerical example, we use a square domain with central flaw to test the fracture and healing process. A loading-reloading path is designed to allow for the fracture and healing. In the stress strain curve, we observe that the load carrying ability drops suddenly during the crack propagation process. Then after the unloading and reloading process, we observe that the stiffness is partially recovered due to the crack healing process. In the phase field evolution pattern, we can clearly observe crack propagation during the fracture process and the healing process during the unloading part. Finally, in the reloading process, the crack propagates through the specimen, which leads to the final failure. We presented a multi-physics material model to describe the dislocation creep, the solution precipitation creep, the anisotropy fracture, and the crack healing process in polycrystalline rock salt with thermodynamic consistency. It is shown that our model is capable of predicting the long-term creep evolution within polycrystalline rock salt.